are back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and fire Chuck Fletcher. I'm joined today by Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
Oh, you did really come in firing already, huh?
Yeah.
I'm all right. I've had an interesting week like you, I'm sure. I mean, different perspectives of it, but I've had an interesting week for sure.
Yeah, we were talking about it just before the show, and I'm coming in hot and heavy from the fan side of things. Kevin, we'll talk about it, but he's got some things to say on the media inside knowledge type thing side of things later.
Aren't you glad we strayed from the typical summer schedule for this, though?
Yeah, this is definitely what we call an emergency episode. You know, even if we didn't have an episode planned, I think we would have broken glass in case of an emergency and gotten a show together tonight.
Right, like we planned for something following free agency because we felt like it was going to be something big,
it sure wasn't, but it was.
It was. That's the thing. It was something big. It just wasn't the something big everybody thought it was going to be.
I'm going to start with a quote.
Okay.
Yep. And this quote is from friend of the show, somebody we've mentioned a number of times, Anthony Sanfilippo from Crossing Broad. This is from an article that he put out that I believe came out Thursday morning. And the big quote, the big kind of headliner quote here. The time has come to end the embarrassment that is Flyers management.
Yeah, that was the headline, right?
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, so it was Thursday morning, afternoon-ish that it came out and I know this because of the fact that Thursday was kind of the day after, like you had a night to reflect on everything. You had a night to reflect on.
It took you a whole night to reflect on all the moves they made, huh?
No. Like, hear me out. It was the
whole night of reflection on Justin Braun and buying out Oscar Lindblom.
Hold on. Here's what I mean by that. Like, most people in my position, we don't write that as the day goes on. Like,
right.
We're kind of sitting back watching. So in other words, you knew the first typical of free agency around the league. Now I'm talking about the league collectively. The first 3 hours of free agency is crazy.
Yeah.
There's just stuff going on all over the place. You don't even have time to look away from one thing and somebody else does something. That's how it works. So you're doing that, and then came 5 o'clock. They had a press conference. The Flyers did.
By the way, on day one, $936 million in contracts were handed out.
Yeah, I meant to go and find that at some point.
Cap Friendly has a day-by-day breakdown.
Well, I know. I was a little preoccupied by some other things that day.
Yeah.
To go worry about how much money was spent around the league, but I knew it was a high number, I'm sure. They had the press conference at 5 o'clock, and then, then you spend the rest of that time kind of going into, like, once you know where they stand and what, like, whether to expect something else or not, you're left with putting it all together, putting all the pieces together, and then going, all right, what's the message I want to send as a writer to the people who are going to read this, the fans, and how do I want to get that message across? Usually, and that's why, like, I sit there and I always call it a night to reflect on it, because I sit there and I have set a few hours to reflect and then come up with the thoughts, put it all together, get it ready, and the next morning everybody gets to see it. And usually, like, if nothing else, I think the hope is that the night of reflection for everybody else aligns with your own reflection much more immediately. And I remember what I wrote, and then went and saw when Anthony put that article out, and there was a lot of similarities. Like, I noticed a lot of things that were similar, and not for nothing, he's in the know about as good as anybody locally, and he's got a ton of respect.
Absolutely.
So if I see that the things that I'm thinking align with the things that he's thinking, or some of the stories are the same, then certainly I feel good about what I put out there, because of the fact that, his word is as good as gospel. So if I'm able to put out something similar and we all kind of feel the same way, then it's like the last thing.
If Ant San Philly tweets something, it's true.
Pretty much, but like the last thing I want to do is see that, like, if I put out some article that freaks out about what happens and has this, like, upset nature to it, like, you should be upset because, and he's trying to talk you off the cliff, then you feel a little like, okay, maybe I overreacted. There, he did not, like, if he's right.
He was right there with you.
Right. If he wrote that, then how does everybody else feel?
He's sprinting towards the cliff, waving you on.
Yeah, pretty much.
And by the way, I have a feeling that the entire Philadelphia fan base is quite ready to dive off that cliff, because this week was not a great week. And I do want to talk about something I mentioned before here.
Sure.
In the day leading up to free agency, we got news that Oscar Lindblom was on waivers for the purpose of an unconditional buyout, and he obviously ended up not getting waived and was bought out. He has since signed a $2.5 million deal, 2 years with the Sharks. So good for him. Congratulations.
Good for him is right.
Right. So much for the smallest contract you ever sign again, but whatever. But that's the thing, right? This move was made presumably in conjunction with a JVR trade to clear space for Johnny Gaudreau. And if that's what it was, it would have softened the blow. And again, I'm just speaking optically from the outside. We're watching them buy Oscar Lindblom out for very little reason, maybe no reason. Because, I mean, Johnny Gaudreau going out, JVR coming in, reverse that. Johnny Gaudreau coming in, JVR going out. It kind of made sense as the bridge number from the fans' perspective.
Well, and let me tell you one thing. I'm going to kind of, on my own side, do the rundown of events and the timeline of everything that affected everything that happened, and everything about Johnny that I found out too as this was going on. I got kind of two separate timelines here. But one thing I will tell you that I didn't include in what I prepped for tonight was that I did hear something about Lindblom being bought out way earlier in the offseason, and it was pulled back for a while. Like, it seemed like for a little while it wasn't going to happen. That maybe, given everything else that they have going on, that maybe one of the things they could actually do was keep him on the roster, put him on waivers straight up,
right,
knowing no one would claim him at $3 million, and pass him through the minors to get him back to the NHL roster in the event that you had to, for LTIR purposes later. So for a little while it was, he's going to get bought out. Then it was, well, maybe they don't have to do that because they can save his money that way for a brief moment and then just reapply it.
Right.
And then it turned out to be like, and I'll get into that later.
Sure.
How it turned out to be, but it turned out to be.
Right. So at the end of the day, Oscar Lindblom gets bought out. The player leaves the roster. The money comes off the cap. It looks like we're clearing money. And then the day comes, and the hour strikes, and no word out of Johnny Gaudreau. Now, we hear that he's not re-signing in Calgary in the days leading up. We hear that he will be testing the market. We know he wants to move closer. It very quickly narrows down to a couple of local teams. I heard that obviously we all know that we assumed the Flyers were in it, or a team, one of the teams on Johnny's list. I'll put it like that. The New Jersey Devils were a team on Johnny's list, the Columbus Blue Jackets, and for a brief moment there was talk about the Islanders, but I'm not sure if an offer was ever made. Lou will deny it, and what am I going to say? So
don't you worry. I'll fill you I'll fill you
sure.
in what I know later.
And
let you go first.
Yeah, absolutely. And it narrows down to these couple of teams, and then we hear word that the Flyers are out. And not only are they out, but pretty much they're just about done for the day. There's really not a whole lot going on in Flyer land, right? We re-signed Justin Braun. Sure. So what are we doing here? Well, there's no direction. It certainly doesn't seem... Thank you. This is if you're watching on our YouTube channel, this is the best... This might be the best graphic we've ever put up. What are the Flyers doing? Because, and I know we're going to get into your breakdown of what you knew when you knew it, but from the outside looking in, from this perspective, I look at a team that a year ago shipped out an offensively minded defenseman and paid 2 picks to do it, to acquire a larger offensive defenseman that they paid more picks to do that. And then this summer, they reacquire a smaller defenseman again, who is offensively minded. Paid him a little bit more, but whatever. I'm not going to nitpick about that. Also, by the way, he's a raging piece of garbage. We bought out the kid who had cancer the year one of our slogans was Fly or Die. We signed, again, noted poor quality human being, and that is putting it about as mildly as I can put it. number 77, who I am, as mentioned on last week's show, I am not going to speak his name on this show very often. We don't get the kid who wanted to come here because Chuck doesn't want to trade a first-round pick, and because, by the way, we're in this garbage situation and we signed this guy for $5 million over the next 2 seasons. We don't have the cap space to do it, so we have to ship out JVR. And not only do we have to ship out JVR, the whole league knows how we have to ship out JVR, so that Chuck Fletcher is entirely bent over a barrel, and he has to include a first-round pick in any deal for JVR. And not only a first-round pick. Now, we've talked about that 2024 first-round pick from Florida. No, that pick's not good enough. We all know that's going to get traded, but not here. Teams know how desperate Chuck Fletcher is, so they want the Philadelphia Flyers 2023 first, which is very likely a top 5 pick in a draft featuring Connor Bedard and Matvei Michkov. What are we doing here, Kevin? Please enlighten me.
Okay, so where do you want me to go here with this? Do you want me to go? I wrote down 3 things that I wanted to cover tonight specifically.
Okay.
The information that came out from. Okay, we just talked about Anthony Sanfilippo being like the local guy that you can take his word for gospel. It feels like, right? So another guy who's anything that he has to say, we value it incredibly, is Elliot Friedman.
Absolutely.
So what he had to say on 32 Thoughts is something I wanted to discuss because there are elements of it that I heard the same things, and there's elements of it that I think there's a little bit not that it's not being said, but I think that he's giving you information that
he's being careful with his words.
Well, he has to.
Of course, absolutely.
Fairness, he's aligning, like there's certain things he's aligning with this that I don't. Like, I'm not saying that they're not true. There's ways that he's right, but he's not completely telling you everything either.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Then I have my own, and you kind of already started.
He writes what he can confirm.
Well, or says on the podcast, like
right.
in this. Yes. Then we have the timeline of events of leading up to this point, which you've already kind of started on, but I will gladly repeat. And again, the other section is what I know about what happened with Johnny, which maybe I'll save for the next graphic that we have, which says more about him.
Yeah, we'll get into Johnny later.
Right,
we got to focus on the Flyers.
Than anything. So, let's put it this way. Let me start with this because I'm just going to read off what I wrote down that I got out of the 32 Thoughts thing that Elliot said, and then go from there because then I'll piece together my timeline and we'll kind of go piece it all together. Okay. So Elliot Friedman on the 32 Thoughts podcast this week says the following things about Johnny Gaudreau to Philadelphia. That there were people in Philadelphia. No, so I wrote down eight different points. Some of them repeat kind of, but we'll get there. Number 1, there were people in Philadelphia who wanted Gaudreau, liked the idea of selling tickets, merchandise, all that type of stuff. But also there was a debate about that the team was 40 points out of a playoff spot last year, and does he alone, taking up all your cap room, solve that problem?
And I agree with that on some level.
And I already wrote that because I wrote when they said they were going to get aggressive when they hired John Tortorella. It's like you can't expect Tortorella or signing Johnny Gaudreau to be your savior. It's not going to happen. But it fit the mold of what it's what they know. They know aggressive, right? Number 2, the Ryan Ellis situation made them think we have to find defensemen. It was a business decision that there were other things that they had to do. Well, we already saw that, right? And I'll get into that more.
And it's just interesting hearing that at the same time we're hearing news that they may be looking to shop Provorov, but whatever.
Well, we'll get into that.
Right.
Number 3, the Flyers feel that John Tortorella can make a difference, that players have a fresh start. It will be overall better, that they have a couple holes as opposed to plug a couple of holes rather than sign one big free agent. Okay. I get it. Like we just said,
it's logical and makes sense. So there's no way Chuck Fletcher's doing it.
But it fits with the you can't expect a savior to come walking through the door, you know?
Right. If Johnny Gaudreau was Connor McDavid, it's a little more of a conversation. Johnny Gaudreau is a very good hockey player. He is elite in the National Hockey League.
He's not Connor McDavid.
Right. He's not even like Austin Matthews. He's just not.
Right. Okay. Number 4 goes back to Ellis, where the Ellis uncertainty is a huge factor. That's the only thing I wrote down for that part. Number 5, Friedman said he thinks that the Flyers had a lot of players on the market, and because they had such a bad season, they were dealing from a position of weakness. It's not the time to trade, say, a Travis Konechny or Ivan Provorov and expect the best return. He thinks that they said it doesn't make any sense to do that.
Okay. I don't hate the logic on that.
Okay. Number 6, that they want to see Ivan Provorov under a new coach, which I will double down on because, hold on, that is true.
Yeah.
And another thing that was mentioned during that part of this discussion is another point that I've made on our show before, that you have one certainty with him and one uncertainty. The uncertainty is they would like to see him play next to Ryan Ellis, and we have no idea when that's going to happen. The certainty is you want to see him play under John Tortorella. Well, that's going to happen. So that's fair. It's fair to want both of those things, by the way. It's just I have no idea when he's playing with Ryan Ellis. I do know when he's going to start playing under John Tortorella. It's going to be in training camp in September, preseason games, regular season on October 13th. Here he comes playing under John Tortorella. We'll see what happens.
That will be interesting.
Sure.
I think John Tortorella is going to have a friggin' field day with Ivan Provorov, by the way, because the kid's willing to go out and die for a blocked shot. Like, let's be honest.
Okay, number 7. To move James Van Riemsdyk, they were asked for the 2023 first, which you already brought up. Heard that people did not want the 2024 first that they got from Florida. Okay, important caveat there. And then number 8, that the Flyers looked at the whole picture, the Ellis situation, the trade market being undervalued because they had a bad season and Philly was desperate, and what it would cost to trade JVR, and wondered, was all of that worth it to sign Gaudreau? That's where Elliot leaves you in the 32 Thoughts podcast.
Right.
Okay. So let's go through the timeline. So last offseason, you start by trading Nolan Patrick and Phil Myers for Ryan Ellis. And I did this on last week's show a little too, but I actually went back and made sure I got all the picks right and all that stuff. So we are actually telling you what this is, you know? And I'm going to put him up on the screen for a second because we're talking about him a lot right now. So you start by getting Ryan Ellis. Huge upgrade on paper. I think we can all agree with that, right? This was the type of defenseman that you wanted to play next to Ivan Provorov, all of that type of stuff, right?
Out of all the moves Chuck Fletcher made last summer, this is the one that all of us universally looked at the most positively.
Absolutely. Your next move was trading 2 draft picks, 2022 second and a 2022 seventh, with Shane Gostisbehere to clear out $4.5 million in cap space.
So, by the way, I just wanted to mention I don't like this graphic because it looks like Chuck's staring into my soul.
Well,
take a look at our YouTube channel.
Yeah, I know. And then you acquire Rasmus Ristolainen for Robert Haig, a 2021 first at 14th overall, technically 13th, by the way, with Arizona losing their pick, and a 2023 second. Then comes the 1-for-1 Cam Atkinson for Jake Voracek trade,
which is fine.
That's where most of the madness stops, because the rest of the offseason was Derek Brassard, Keith Yandel, Martin Jones, Nate Thompson, all on 1-year deals.
Some free agency pickups. Yep.
So, and I wrote this in the article I put out the day after free agency, right? In theory, that was a good offseason. Ellis was a massive upgrade. Ristolainen was an experiment, but he had 1 year of term left, so you had an out.
And for the record, technically speaking, in terms of on-ice product, probably an upgrade over Robert Hagg.
Oh, for the player that was in the deal, yes. For the pick,
and that's why I said on the ice, because the picks are magic beans.
But there's nothing wrong with having a guy and sitting here saying, "Listen, we're doing an experiment here." That was a more costly one than the 1-year deals, but to have an out, hey, we can trade the guy at the deadline if this doesn't work. Hey, we can, if even it's worse if he just walks at the end of the year. But if he walks at the end of the year, he walks.
Right.
Atkinson was a different type of player, shoot first mentality kind of guy.
We needed Cam Atkinson, and honestly, we'll probably mention him when we talk about Johnny Gaudreau in a little bit too.
Yeah, a little, because he had a Twitter moment this week that was kind of a little salt in the wound for you, right?
No, not for me. It was
a little. Well,
like, I get it.
I know.
No, because listen, here's the thing. There are certain people on this earth who could look you straight in the face and tell you that they just punched your mother, and you'll question what your mother did to deserve it. And Cam Atkinson's one of those people. Like, if he gets mad enough to physically harm somebody, what did they do? Who did they kill?
By the way, Cam Atkinson had a week on social media, by the way, because there's something that involves Johnny Gaudreau, and then they announced that they were expecting.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, a quick little congratulations. It's not
like
all bad in
by
Flyers
the way,
world.
the family man who has 2 sons already is becoming a girl dad now.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah, so
Oh,
that was really cool.
Yeah.
All right, so let me go back to this and get back into. Oh, so everything else that I mentioned, all the other signings from that year were low risk, right? So I don't want to bury Chuck Fletcher for all of that, because you're trying to set up. This is everything that you're trying to go for. You're trying to see if Ellis makes Provorov better, Atkinson changes your offense. Is Ristolainen better because he's not the number one guy?
Is Carter Hart better behind a real defense for once?
Right. So, yeah. Because, yes, in theory, this could have been a really good team last year. In theory. So we
talked about that.
Right. So let's go to December. When it starts to go off the rails and Sean Couturier's hurt and Kevin Hayes has been out, then in, then out again, and Ryan Ellis has played 4 games and is out now. And
there's no news on him ever.
Well, at the time, we didn't really know that. It was still pretty early in this whole thing. But the next move is Alain Vigneault is going to get fired.
Yep.
That's when the Flyers organization faced a critical decision. Because on the day that you fired the coach, on the day you decided he wasn't right for the team anymore and all that, you also had to decide that the general manager and president of hockey operations, is he right too?
Right.
Was he the right guy to lead you out of this situation that you did not envision when you started last season? At the time when this decision's being made, or shortly after anyway, at the time, you knew that there were 2 very important decisions that were on the table for whoever this was. Number 1 was, if the season's going off the rails, Claude Giroux is going to probably get traded. And you're going to trade away a franchise player who's your captain.
We'll mention him in a little bit as well.
Oh, we will. That's number 1. And number 2 was going to be whether immediately or whether way later on, in the Flyers case this time around, it was later on, but who's the next coach? Permanently, obviously. Who's the next full-time head coach?
Right. Mike Yeo was never going to be the guy, let's be honest.
And they held a press conference in January. And they put Chuck Fletcher up there. Or I shouldn't say they put him up there. It was supposed to be his press conference, and Dave Scott showed up too, the Flyers governor. And together, they both essentially stated in different ways with different wordings. Chuck Fletcher's the one who used the aggressive retool line.
Yep.
Dave Scott said, I want to do everything I can to, I want to do everything we can to fix this now. Right. I'm opening up the blank checkbook.
Right.
So let's go to the trade deadline. What's the story there? You remember that?
Cut and burn. Slash and burn, sell everything you can.
Well, no, it is. But what's the big story that came out of the deadline?
Claude Giroux.
Yeah, but what about it? Not just that he got moved.
Well, there's all sorts of stories. There's the fact that he only agreed to waive his contract or his no movement clause to go to Florida. There's the fact that he made that information public, therefore hurting the Flyers' negotiating standpoint. There was that cute little line from Chuck Fletcher that we allegedly heard about that essentially led to the fact that Claude Giroux wasn't welcome back or wasn't expected to be part of future plans.
All right, so here's the story that at least as far as I know it, or as far as we've heard the most of, was that all Giroux wanted was a handshake agreement that the door was open when the offseason rolled around.
And
he
Chuck
just
wouldn't
wanted
give
to
it
know there was a chance. And he wasn't given that, said, fine, trade me to Florida then. And Fletcher had no leverage and ultimately had to move Yerman Rubtsov and Connor Bunneman and a 2024 fifth-round pick to trade Giroux to get back Owen Tippett, a 2024 first, and a 2023 third.
Yep.
At the same time, Fletcher made 2 very fine trades involving Brassard and Justin Braun. Gets back 2 2023 picks. That's great.
Sure.
But he also did something else that sets the tone for this offseason. He re-signed Rasmus Ristolainen to a 5-year deal with a $5.1 million cap hit. The out that you had to either trade him with 1 year of term left, which at that point in time is what, 2 months, and or let him walk at the end of the year. The out is gone. You had a chance, and now you're locked into yet another long-term deal.
Yep.
Now we're into the offseason. Aggressive retool, right? The first move is very much an aggressive move. It's an aggressive blank check move because there is no salary cap for your coach. So they go out and they hire John Tortorella, well-established, known to be tough and demanding, but protective of his players, and known for a specific style. All right. That fits the narrative, right?
Oh, yeah. In a world where the Flyers are good, John Tortorella would be an entertaining as hell Philadelphia Flyers coach. He would be a fantastic choice for this city if the Flyers were good. The problem is that they're not.
Then we get to draft weekend, and last Friday, they trade for Tony DeAngelo. The cost is a 2022 fourth, a 2023 third, and a 2024 second.
Yep.
He then signs a 2-year deal with a $5 million cap hit. Again, whether you like the guy or not, he had 54 points last season and fits the narrative of this aggressive retool thing.
Right.
And this is where you were starting to go at the top of the show. Then comes the buyout of Oscar Lindblom. You start that process. This is a business decision. Everybody loves the guy.
Yep.
But they needed the money and what they wanted to try to do, and what they were going to get out of that in particular was more than they actually were going to pay him if he stayed on the roster. They actually got $3.33 million.
Right, because he's under 25 and you buy him out for one-third. It's a whole little cap thing.
So they do it. That left one move to free up the space that they wanted.
Yep.
They were shopping James Van Riemsdyk, and the price was too high for them at the time.
And they've been shopping him for 18 months at this
sure.
point.
Now, to kind of go back to what you were already talking about and what I mentioned with the 32 Thoughts pod that Elliot said, if the pick that everybody wanted was the 2023 first, the Flyers are right for holding on to it. But that doesn't absolve you from the contracts that you signed to lead up to this point that take up all of your cap space.
Right.
You're paying Rasmus Ristolainen and Tony DeAngelo a combined $10.1 million toward the cap to price yourself out of signing everyone else except for bringing back Justin Braun and handing out a 4-year deal with a modified no-trade clause to Nick Delorier. And, to do that, that's not exactly aggressive.
No. It's aggressively something. But here's the thing. You're allowed to go over the cap in the summer. Mm-hmm. If you keep it in your shorts for 2 weeks and don't sign the jerk-off from Carolina, you have the room to make this move. You can move JVR when the right deal comes along. You're not under a whole lot of pressure. You don't, maybe you still buy out Lindblom. I know you mentioned that was something they've been talking about for months. There's $8 million right there.
Well, and that what you're saying is exactly what one of the things I put out there later or said on the radio or whatever, which is you worked backwards. Right, you don't work backwards in this case, because if you work backwards and go, well, gee, you know what? We'll get this guy now, and that's going to price us out of this guy technically, but the last thing you want to do is outprice yourself for everybody else because of one move you made that I don't want to say could have waited, but you could have addressed the need after the fact. I get it. There's a good chance that DeAngelo is not available beyond the draft weekend. But
sure, you go get Brent. If you want to get real aggressive, you get Brent Burns. That's who Carolina got to replace him.
Well, we're going to get into all those teams too. But that was the problem for me. They came out and they've said for 6 months that this was going to be aggressive. They said they lacked high-end talent, and this was a chance to sign high-end talent.
Sure.
And don't get me wrong, you have a lot of holes left to fill. And rightfully so, when you try to get the prize of free agency, there are plenty of other teams out there that want what you want and are trying to do what you're trying to do. This particular high-end talent player wanted to play for you.
Right. He signed for 9.8 in Columbus. Could you have gotten him for 9 flat?
I don't know about that. What I kept coming back to. Okay, you want to know what I kept
Maybe.
coming back to? No, do you want to know what I kept coming back to? And I'll kind of go into this a little bit when we get to the Johnny stuff a little bit.
Yeah.
But he turned down, and I think Calgary went higher later, but he turned down 9.5, and I think he would have done 9.5 in Philly.
I believe I heard that Calgary went into 10.
They tried.
They went above 10, but I think at that point he had already kind of.
They pushed it so far to the limit that it's not even funny, and they absolutely, without question, did their absolute best to keep him.
Yeah? Well, yeah.
No, they did. Believe me, I don't think they wanted to go to 10, and they went to 10 to try to keep him.
Yeah, but they didn't go to 10 until the last minute. If they had gone to 10
by
in
that point,
May, they might have gotten them.
I don't know. It's interesting. I'm
just saying,
But, okay. This guy wanted to play for your team, and you didn't find. Not only did you not find a way to make it happen, but the approach all of a sudden got passive and reversed course.
Insert Happy Gilmore. You blew it. I'm sorry.
It's Billy Madison.
You're Billy Madison. I'm sorry. Insert Billy Madison. You blew it.
One thing I want to make clear about this, and I don't know if I think I put this in the article too, but I don't recall completely. This isn't about Johnny Gaudreau. Like, we could be saying this about any big name, high skill free agent that happened. Like, it just happened to be Gaudreau on the market. It just happened to be Gaudreau wanted to play in Philadelphia. This isn't about him. Like, there are people who can agree, very much what was said at the very top of the 32 Thoughts thing. And I'm one of them. I agree with this, that signing him alone wasn't going to change much of anything. Like,
right.
It makes you a better team. Sure. Does it make you for sure in certain playoff team? Does it get you out of this hole? We don't know that. So did they dodge a bullet there? Maybe, but time will tell on that. But there's the thing for me was from the earliest points of this offseason, I believed Johnny Gaudreau would become a Flyer.
Okay.
Because that was what they seemed to be setting themselves up to do. Like based on what they said they were trying to do, when you equate aggressive and high-end talent and skill players and things like that, when you equate all that into if you put that together in a formula and looked at the free agent list, the player it was going to spit out was Johnny Gaudreau. That's right. That's what it turns out to be.
It's a 100-point player who was born in your backyard and grew up loving the Flyers. Hello.
Right. So rather than doing that, rather than getting a guy like that, they said aggressive retool for 6 months and came away from the offseason with Tony DeAngelo, Nick Delorier, and essentially, and I'm not even including Justin Braun because he was on the roster last year, so they've run the rest of it back.
God, I hate this team.
And I sit there and go, that's it? That's aggressive? I don't care who the coach is. You're supposed to win with a roster that's built like that? Like, it made absolutely no sense.
The time has come to end the embarrassment that is Flyers management.
So maybe we should throw this one up here too for a moment, because that's that's a question. Now it's a question that's, as I've written it here, it's a vague question, is it not?
It is. Tear it down can mean a lot of things. Now, it can mean the roster. It can mean the front office. It can mean both those things. It can mean the Wells Fargo Center. Are we ready for a new building? I don't know.
Not with all the renovations that they're doing.
I know. They plan on being in that building for another 20 years.
All right, so I'll explain why this is a banner.
Yeah.
For us, because that's literally that's the start of the headline for the story I wrote the next day.
Okay. And can I just tell you how I feel about it?
Yeah.
I want everyone gone. I want Dave Scott gone. I want Chuck Fletcher gone. I want Paul Holmgren gone. I want Bobby Clark gone. I want the entire alumni crew. I'm sorry, Bob the Hound Kelly. We love you. We'll party with you in Sea Isle. Just get away from the team. Everybody who's ever worn a Philadelphia Flyers jersey except Danny Briere, get away from the team. Right now. Forever and ever. Go retire. I don't wish firing upon people, but I also know that the people I'm talking about are probably multimillionaires who have at very minimum had 6 or 7 figure salaries for 20 or 30 years. So I don't really feel bad wishing the loss of their job upon them. And I want all of them to be fired. We can find another Comcast fan or another Flyers fan at Comcast who can sit in Dave Scott's team or Dave Scott's seat and actually be a representation of what this team needs. Bad. It has been awful. And things were bad before that, and there were symptoms of this, but it's been awful since the second Ed Snyder died.
So here's the thing for me. There are a couple things that you're saying that I do think are a little extreme. You're not off base.
Who, me? No.
You're not off base with a lot of it, to be honest. I don't think you need to rope the alumni that already shake hands with people on a regular basis and just make appearances into this. I don't want to look down and see the old guard anymore.
But that's what I think this team needs. It's a culture change. And that means, at least for the moment, completely, entirely, wholly sanitize yourself from the Broad Street bullies. I don't want Bernie Perrant to be able to walk into the Wells Fargo Center with a ticket. No offense, Bernie, I love you. But this team needs something drastically different. This team is very clearly rotten to the core. The entire tree is dead. No fruit will come from it.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, that part's hard to me because they're already doing exactly what I like, and I kind of said this in the article. I don't want we can talk about Chuck Fletcher all we want to. This isn't just a Chuck Fletcher problem because.
Nope.
And I kind of spelled it out a little differently because of the fact that there were two things for me that kind of came up with that involved this old guard, if you will. They're advisors in the sense that Chuck Fletcher can bounce around ideas, but they also are kind of a feedback committee for Dave Scott. That
right
for a person who's not a hockey guy like Dave Scott is, and wants to know how things are going. He may go to Bob Clark or Paul Holmgren and
ask, he does, and
hey,
I think that's the problem.
Well, and that's why I'm saying then, you tell Bob Clark, Paul Holmgren, and Dean Lombardi, thank you for your services as senior advisors. You ride off into the sunset, and you can come back and shake hands with people all you want to, but you're not sitting in a room making decisions anymore.
For the record, I don't think Dave Scott comes to Bob Clark and says, how is he doing? I think Bob Clark goes to Dave Scott and says, here's what he's doing. And there's a distinct difference there. I don't think Bob Clark ever truly handed over the keys to the general manager's office.
I don't know if anybody ever handed over the keys to anything. I think they all have their hands on the keys. You know what I mean?
That's why every single person who ever wore a jersey for this team needs to leave.
Here's the thing about this, okay? If you've got you've got a bunch of voices in there right now that I don't think any of them know what direction they want to go. For all I know, Chuck Fletcher's in there trying to do the right thing and getting overruled. You know what I mean?
If he's picking his battles, he's not picking the right ones.
Right, but what I'm saying is that I don't want... He is the general manager and president of hockey operations. Now, I'm still critical of what he's doing, but if he's not the one who's making the final call on what the direction of the franchise is, then you got a problem.
So what you're saying is Chuck Fletcher's either a yes man or a buffoon.
Well, I think that the whole operation is incompetent.
Yeah.
Because to me, you're just bouncing around ideas and
we're throwing it at the wall and seeing what sticks. Well, and you can't do that on the fly in the National Hockey League.
That's not even the biggest problem. They did everything around. If I have to hear one more time about Sean Couturier is going to be back and Kevin Hayes is going to be back, I'm not sitting here saying.
Why do you trust your medical staff? Well, How do you know that?
Well, and I'm not sitting here. Well, look, I think that the timeline looks good for them, but I'm less worried about those. It's actually less about them starting the season. It's more about them holding up.
Yep.
That's the thing. Like, you're
Right.
hoping that they play. Like, you're hoping Sean Couturier gives you 73, 74 games this year.
When
right?
has the medical staff ever proven? Okay, I am sure that they are all competent individuals, and I am not.
Well, don't forget that what the medical staff is currently going through either.
Right. Well, right, and I'm sure that there's some angst on top of it. But it certainly seems like every time a Flyer is injured, there's a setback, or he takes longer to rehab than expected, or he's got to get surgery for this. Right. Or he's got to get surgery for this, or we rush him back too soon and he gets hurt again, or this, or that, or we don't diagnose Nolan Patrick for 2 years, or like, hello, can we get a new medical staff too, please?
Well, because the whole thing is messed up, right? Like,
the city of Philadelphia has 412 hospitals, and they're all excellent. Can we get somebody from one of them? Hello?
So, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. But, so here's, like, I just don't know how you can move forward with any of them. Like, one of the
anybody.
Like I said, the only guy who I keep coming back to that I sit there and say, you know what, it's not really fair to throw it all on his
Danny Briere.
Well, yeah, because I actually had to go back and look it up. He was officially hired at the end of February.
I know, it was, he gets an absolute pass.
So it's been what? He hadn't even been officially an
general manager.
He hasn't officially been an assistant GM for more than 5 months yet.
Assistant to the GM.
Well, yeah, but it's pretty much assistant GM.
Okay, so in 6 months, we're not going to, but we should see Daniel Briere as the GM and John Tortorella as the head coach somehow.
Actually, no, I don't think so. Like, you know what they really need to do? And there's two things.
Fire everybody?
Well, yes, but like, here's the thing. There's two things they need to do when it comes to whatever they want to do to make the direction go the right way. You need to get somebody in here first and foremost, and I don't want to name names or go there yet, because there's not. I don't know. Like, I know what I'd like them to try to do, or who like. You have to look at current general managers today, and say, like, I'd like for them to have a guy like this. You know, that's what I'll do for you in a second. But the first thing you need to do is get somebody in here who knows what he wants to do, and then puts people around him who are in agreement. Not people who are around him just saying yes to everything. You don't want
people who think the same way.
Right. You need people who collectively all understand building and constructing an NHL team today.
The word you're looking for is cohesive.
Well, yeah, you want a cohesive unit, but you don't want. The last thing you want is something from 20. You need like the method 20 years ago. The method 20 years ago will not work. End of story, end of conversation. The type of general manager that I would think you want, and one a great example, just got promoted, by the way.
Okay. I'm thinking of an example myself, so I'm curious who your example is.
I'd like to hear your example, because I have like 3 others if you take this one. So it's okay.
Well, my general my selection here is Don Waddell.
That's an interesting one, and yes,
because
he did follow
the front office in Carolina is all heading in the same direction. They are on one singular mission with one singular plan to do the best they can do to go win the Stanley Cup. Right. And every year they do that, and every year they do a spectacular job.
So, okay, so that was not one of the names I was thinking of. But
fair enough.
But that's because what I did is I grabbed every recent assistant that moved to become a general manager. So the most recent example of that, by the way, is for the now defending Stanley Cup champion Colorado Avalanche, who just moved Joe Sakic to just president of hockey ops, and their general manager is Chris McFarland, who was their assistant for
their general manager is Joe Sakic. He just didn't want to do quite as much work.
It doesn't matter. They managed to retain a guy like McFarland before somebody else came in and said, "Hey, you know what? Your assistant's probably doing a really good job.
Right.
We should get him." Right. I think of when Steve Yzerman decided to leave Tampa and Julien Breeze was right behind. It's the upbringing, is it not? Like, hey, I learned from Sakic. I learned from Yzerman. Think about in for the New York Rangers. Chris Drury was the guy in training for a long time, and he stays. And he becomes a general manager, and he's a finalist for the Exec of the Year award, right? All that stuff. Another good example, previously with Columbus, but now with Florida, Bill Zito.
Yep.
Another guy who goes through the ranks, learns a lot, and then he's ready for the job.
I know a while ago, so it's been a while since I followed the NFL, but a while ago, coaching trees were a big thing. And who came out of the Bill Parcells coaching tree and who came out of the blah, blah, blah coaching tree. And I'd be curious to see kind of where the genesis is at in the NHL. You know, I'd like to see what guys kind of spawned the most future head coaches.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. That's a good point.
Maybe we'll do that over the summer at some point.
Yeah, maybe.
That's a fun one.
Show. So let's see about this. Trying to figure out where else to go. So maybe we should. So, are we done with this part? Kind of like we.
Yeah, I think so.
Kind of said our piece. So, do we want to get to the next guy?
Yeah, is that Johnny?
Yeah, of course it is.
Let's get to Johnny Hockey.
All right. So, do you want my stuff on Johnny Gaudreau now?
Yeah, hit me.
So let's play a timeline game here because. And this is kind of a short timeline between the signing and the information. Right. This is going to be like 3 days worth of information. And this, it'll be what it'll be. So this timeline is a big reason why I was frustrated with the approach that they had. So on Monday morning, right after we recorded last, I probably had published the show for 20 minutes.
Right.
I was told then, and this is not like, and oh, by the way, as I kind of said earlier, I'm going to kind of let you know as I tell everything what ended up being kind of not true and what ended up being true, right? Because I heard a lot of stuff and I didn't really put a lot of it out there because there wasn't a lot of backup information to support it. It was kind of guesswork, so I didn't want to just run with something. But I'll tell you what turned out to be true and what didn't. So this first thing turned out to be true. Monday morning. Not 20 minutes after the episode goes up, I was told Johnny Gaudreau turned down 2 offers from Calgary in the last couple of days. Turned out to be true.
Yep.
This next thing also turned out to be true. Now, Monday afternoon, I was told about his desire to play in Philadelphia, that this is where he wants to go.
Yep.
Another thing that was right. Monday night, I was told Oscar Lindblom was being bought out. This is where it gets a little bit tricky because at around the same time, I was told the next step was a JVR trade with a first.
Okay.
And essentially told in no uncertain terms, it's happening. He's going to sign in Philly probably. This is all lined up. They know what they're going to do, and it's happening.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. Now, this is why I wasn't. This is one of those.
This is why you didn't run with anything.
Well, because the next morning, this is Tuesday morning, and this is maybe 12 hours after I had this previous conversation. I was told with more than 24 hours to go before the market even opens, I was told that Johnny Gaudreau would not become a Flyer on Wednesday.
Okay.
Which turned out to be right, obviously.
Right.
There's a few details that are going to come that didn't have as much truth, or maybe they did, and there's some things that happened that change it, so I'll get into that. But sure. I didn't really put it out there because while I wasn't necessarily surprised that he was not going to become a Flyer potentially at that moment, I didn't want to put it out there because of the fact that there was also that thought in my mind that there's still a lot of time left here.
Right. What if you're getting that information because there's no JVR trade, but then a JVR trade materializes?
Well, right. It was pretty obvious that was the move that needed to happen for them.
That's what's holding everything up.
But at the same time, this is the part where as soon as somebody kind of hits you with, nope, it's not happening. This is the part where they get desperate and they do make the trade happen, and they don't care about the first round pick anymore because we're going to miss out on Gaudreau. This is, we got to do this. And this is where I literally wrote in the notes that I have for the show tonight, I literally wrote the 11th hour offer comes in.
Right.
And they decide they do this, but what I was told ended up being true, obviously.
Right.
Now this is going to be really interesting details for you because this is now where the other teams start to get involved. I was told at that given time that it was down to 2 teams, and for one that he was still weighing Calgary.
Okay.
And that there was a mystery team that was in the running, and for what it's worth, it was not Columbus at that time.
Oh, really?
Yes, it was not Columbus. I don't know how true this is, but I'll float to you, or I'll tell you the team that was floated my way. regarding Johnny Gaudreau and where he could go. Pittsburgh.
Oh, we would have had problems, Jonathan.
Now, before people sit there and go, how would that have happened? This was before Malkin had signed, and there was a lot of buzz that Malkin was going to market.
It was reported that Malkin was going to market.
Right. So maybe there was something that they could have done to enter this sweepstakes and still be in, because Malkin got what? 6.1 also, right? That's his AAV also. He got the same thing that Letang got. I
couldn't handle Crosby to Gaudreau. Ugh. Makes me want to vomit.
Believe me, as this was going through, I even had my immediate reaction to the possibility of Pittsburgh was, geez, you're talking Gensel, Crosby, Gaudreau,
it's obscene.
Letang and throw somebody else in there. And I'm like, he might actually replicate the 115 doing that. You know? Like
he might score 60. It's not crazy. Possible. It's not crazy.
Possible. Yeah. All right. So that's okay. So now that same night, Gaudreau says he's not returning to Calgary at that point. So that comes out, right? And I go back and I ask, so is it Pittsburgh? Because that's what I was being fed.
Right.
And at that time, I was what I heard back was that Carolina was kind of back in and making a bit of a push. I also believe that the Devils were in. And to kind of feed back, and this goes back to the Flyers thing a little bit, because the Flyers said they were never in on Johnny Gaudreau.
Right. And
Elliot Friedman said that they were never really in this thing, right? Like, he kind of said that way. Here's what I think that means. Because I kind of said on the radio in the
they were trying really hard to act not interested so they could trade JVR?
No, here's what I think this means. Because my immediate reaction on the radio to that was that Chuck Fletcher flat out lied. And I said that. I said it was a lie. It was a complete lie.
Fair enough. I think it's a reasonable assumption.
Here's what I think it really means to say that they were never in and still be and be right about it, but be wrong about it at the same time, if you will. I think there was definitely interest. He was interested in them. Obviously, it was out there that he was.
Right. It was pretty open.
And I believe they were interested in him. The reason that they said they were never in on him is because when they didn't move the contract they needed to move, they never made an offer.
Right.
That's what I think happened. And that's why we can kind of sit there and say they were never in. So what I'm also going to tell you is that, at least from what I believe, and I don't have any info on this, but this is my belief, or based on a couple things I saw, I think that the Islanders were in the same position. That they were interested and kept an ear out for what's happening.
They were looking for the cap space if they could find it,
but never went in. They never I fully believe the Devils had an offer on the table.
I believe the Devils might have had a couple offers on the table.
Carolina was trying a variety of things, as we'll get into. Obviously, Columbus got in on it later, but I believe that's why that we're hearing the Flyers were not in, because they never put a formal offer out there. And I think the Islanders did the same thing. I don't think there was ever a formal, we can go here, right?
That's fair.
Now, Columbus, though, was a complete and total dark horse. Never mentioned at any point during conversations I had about this. Never speculated at any point. Completely out of the blue. This was the place. It was
out of the blue, huh?
Yeah, I guess I didn't mean the pun there, but whatever. And believe me, because here's the thing about that signing, by the way. I need you to picture my Wednesday timeline here, because free agency opens at 12. And I'm sitting here, and by that point, it was already starting to kind of come out already that this wasn't going to happen.
Right. And more importantly, the JVR deal wasn't going to happen.
Well,
because I think this would have very quickly fallen into place.
Because I think that now it was pretty early on that it was no, Gaudreau's not happening. It didn't have anything to do with the JVR thing as much anymore, because it was just
fair.
They're out, they're done, not done, they're out. I don't want to say they're done yet, because we didn't find that out until 5:00 when it came straight out of the general manager's mouth that we're done on day one of the free agency period.
It's great to hear, Chuck. Aggressive retool. Thanks, bud.
Yeah, which, by the way, to sit there, the other thing that I've heard a lot about, and this is a fair point, that was taken away from the press conference was that it was going to be really hard to move to move multiple contracts to.
That's your job, man.
Right.
I want to hear how hard it is.
That's your job, and you accepted it. And if if you don't like how hard it is, then get out.
But it's hard.
Right. Is that well, here was the thing. Did you hear what other GMs were saying? Like when they go and get this guy or they get that guy or Columbus gets Gaudreau, and it's when you have that opportunity, you go to work and you find a way to make it work. And you've got a general manager who said the opposite.
And listen, and we talked about it a little bit. I agree that they probably shouldn't have traded their 2023 first.
Right.
But here's the thing. Don't make the other stupid moves that put you in that
right.
spot to begin with.
Right. That's the stuff that I don't get either. You postured this whole aggressive retool, did a bunch of stuff that went into it, and then...
And this isn't some crazy circumstance where Johnny Gaudreau suddenly found himself upon the free agent market. I've been talking about the Johnny Gaudreau tampering committee on this show for like 2 years. Like, we've known about Johnny Gaudreau as a free agent possibility. We joked about it when Kevin Hayes signed in 2019.
No, what you really did was this, and this is the biggest example of it that I know of as far back as I can go with this. Hayes was already here. They get Atkinson. They get Yandel. They get all these guys who are all buds with each other. And
right.
You were
what are we doing?
And you were coming on the show, and every time it came up, you were just sitting here going, "Come home, Johnny.
Come home, Johnny."
You were sitting here, and he did.
Turns out he wanted to.
He wanted to. All right. So
if Johnny ever writes an autobiography, please tell me how cheap you would have signed in Philly for. Please tell me.
Oh, that would be funny.
Tell me you would have signed for 7, so I can just be even more angry at Chuck Fletcher.
So let's get back to where I was at with what I was saying before. Okay. So everything happens at that point, and it's 5:00, and they have the press conference, and they say we're done. Okay, that's my cue, doing strictly Flyer stuff. My work is done.
Right, your day's over.
I have to write an article on this is what they did today, and they're done.
Here's what they did and didn't do.
Well, here's what they didn't do. Here's what they said they were going to do. Here's what they ultimately did. Here's how none of it makes sense. Blah.
Here is the exact place on my ass that Chuck can kiss. Yeah,
that's more for you to say than me. But so my work is done. I go out I'm out to dinner that night because I got all the time in the world now. There's no signings that are going to break on my end.
The GM came out and said they're done.
Right, and it was not long after I sat down for dinner that night that that Johnny's destination was out there. That it was Columbus, and there's an element to me that's interesting about that. By the way.
Before you get into this, the contract, by the way, is 7 years, 9.75 per. Johnny Gaudreau is going to be an even wealther man than he already is. All right, go ahead.
I saw it rounded up to 9.8, which
Cap Friendly has it as 68.25, 975 a year. So
because they get super technical about it. I think it was Friedman's tweet was 9.8,
9.8,
but it was probably 975 is what the real number is. Yes.
Right.
So I see that and I kind of just, it's not push it out of my mind, but it's okay, but do you notice what time that happened? There's a lot of guys, even big ones, who within an hour and a half or 2 hours of free agency make their call, right?
Right, and they definitely wait until noon to start talking with teams about contracts. Wink.
Well, sure, but
there's no conversation beforehand. None.
But do you see where I'm going with this?
Yes.
He waited.
Yep.
He waited all day, as in, please tell me there's a chance.
I believe I heard Elliot Friedman mention that around 3:00 there was still an offer from the Devils on the table.
I believe that. I believe that he was weighing plenty of stuff as the afternoon went on, and in the back of his mind going, all right, when's Philly getting here?
If the phone rings and Chuck Fletcher's name pops up, he's answering it with tears in his eyes because he's so happy. Come on, Chuck. Make the call, buddy.
So let's do something else for a minute here, and I'm going to try to see here if I can bounce to. Yeah, I can do this here. So I want to go to this because this is important. We're going to take the banner off the screen here.
Okay.
For a minute, and we're going to go and look at something that I put together because one thing we need to talk about was because Johnny Gaudreau went local in some capacity. He went not too far from home, He went
a short 45-minute ride away from home
Bingo.
if you take a plane flight. Like it's quick.
It's not complicated here.
And if you really want to drive it, it's about 7 hours. I've done it a couple times.
And actually, he didn't just do that because yes, Columbus is the 45-minute flight. Columbus also gets to play in Philadelphia 3-4 times a year, New Jersey,
New York,
New York's 3-4 times a year, Washington 3-4 times a year.
Right. His family can see him probably close to 20 times this year and never have to drive for more than 90 minutes.
Bingo. All right. So that means that Johnny Gaudreau landed in the Metropolitan Division.
He sure did.
There are plenty of others who did this week too. So can we take the Flyers off season and kind of do some comparisons? Because this is pretty.
Please, for the love of God.
By the way, I was prepping this graphic this afternoon and had to revise it before the show tonight because another move was made by another divisional team. So let's get into all of it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is really big. So look at these lists. Okay.
And if you're not watching our YouTube channel, go check it out there. YWT podcast will pop right up.
For the people who aren't, but you should go and look at this on the screen because, first of all, by the way, this is as close to the NHL Network graphic as I can give you.
So you want to talk about a team that acquired quality, or do you want to talk about a team that acquired quantity? Because we have both options here. Where do you want to start?
Can we talk about the ones that did both at the same time?
Yeah, let's talk about the Carolina Hurricanes.
Okay, you want to start with Carolina?
Yeah, because I think they acquired the most of both. Because
it's interesting because they acquired two guys in particular that are older, but certainly have their reputation for being able to do a lot of things.
They got Brent Burns, who is one of those older players you were talking about. They got him at a reduced cap hit, so it's not going to crush him. I believe 2 more years left on him, maybe 3, something like that. He will be sheltered within their system. They'll probably be playing him with Jacob Slavin, possibly the best pure defenseman in the world.
Right.
And if that's the case, Brent Burns can do whatever he wants. We all know he used to be a forward.
Right.
Jacob Slavin can handle the back end. Don't worry about it. They also acquired Max Pacioretty and Dylan Coughlin. I'll throw him in here too. For free.
Lane Peterson came over in the Burns deal too, so that's
okay.
That's why that's on there too.
Yes. But Pacioretty and Coughlin specifically because of the price they paid for him, which by the way was nothing. Future considerations, which very rarely turns into much. And I mean, I mentioned Don Waddell earlier in the show. He has had a fantastic little offseason.
Can we mention the part where Andre Kasha is the only free agent signing that they made? The rest were all trades.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Andre Kasha is going to be... okay, so another name on this list signed with the New York Rangers, Vincent Trocheck, leaving Carolina. I think Andre Kasha is going to slip into that role very, very well.
I think there's a chance that Pacioretty does even.
That's fair. And that's fair.
That's more the move that I align with that Kasha.
If you trade them out for 1-for-1 and then you've still added Andre Kasha?
Right. Well, and Andre Kasha, the only thing that he has to do more than anything is stay healthy.
And you traded one offensive defenseman for another. I mean, it's arguable at this point in time whether 77 and Brent Burns is... it's probably a bit of a downgrade on the ice, quite frankly.
I think they gave up less to get Burns, though. Back plenty for D'Angelo.
They got 3 picks in return that they're going to be seeing the fruits of for 3 more seasons, whether they keep them or trade them.
It's pretty funny stuff.
Great deal.
Who do you want to go? Well, you already mentioned the Rangers, so let's just jump to the Rangers.
Yeah,
you already
absolutely.
Trocheck, so let's just jump. I mean, they didn't do a lot, but then again, did they have to?
No, I mean, they shipped out Alexander Georgiev, and you might be sitting there thinking, well, wait. Who's going to play behind Shesterkin then? Well, they picked up Louis Domingue and Yaroslav Halak, who will be
their choice.
A supremely competent 1B and 1C, especially because there's only going to be about 25 games to play for whoever ends up in that backup spot.
Behind Igor Shesterkin.
Let's be honest. If Igor wants to play, Igor's playing.
Right. And for what it's worth, the other name on that list for the Rangers, Ryan Carpenter, is very much the type of player that they try to get the most out of. Like, one of the players that they lost, and I do kind of want to touch on some of the players that they lost, because the Rangers probably lost more than anything in the division. Like, they had a lot of free agents that they weren't able to keep. Like, we knew that Strome was going to be tough, Ryan Strome, that is.
Right.
And we knew that Kopp was going to be tough. And Vetrano was another one. He left too.
Man, Kopp in Detroit, by the way, that's a sneaky, really good signing for Steve Yzerman. That's a good signing.
Don't jump too far ahead. We're going to get to that.
Okay.
Don't worry, I have something prepared for them.
We got league ads too, huh?
We got a couple teams that the Flyers are going to see regularly enough that I thought were not completely impressive, but like two of them were.
I'm looking at the Washington Capitals here, and does Marcus Johansson really count as an acquisition?
Well, because he was already there, yeah, I know. No, but the other two I was really actually impressed with. I think, first of all, that if you're going to sub out a goaltender, I'm not trying to sit here and say that Kemper is the greatest goaltender in the league by any stretch, but when you decide that you're going to move both goaltenders in some capacity, then getting Darcy Kemper, who just won a Stanley Cup, is not bad.
Capitals make the playoffs this year.
Well, I don't know if I ever put them out of the playoffs, to be honest.
Man, but look at this division.
Right.
Look at this division. And then
I know.
And then look at the Atlantic.
I know.
The playoffs in the East are going to be ridiculous. The race for the playoffs this year is going to be ridiculous. And then the first two rounds are going to be ridiculous. I can't wait.
And by the way, so I already mentioned Kemper. Dylan Strome's another one, by the way. I thought was a good value acquisition for Washington, honestly.
Yeah, but the signing I'm excited most there is Connor Brown.
Well, they got him in a trade. And
the acquisition there.
Yeah, the acquisition. It's an interesting one. I do think that he's got a role that he can play. So I understood it. I'm not like I get it for sure.
He's gonna be a problem on that team. He's gonna be Brad Marchand-esque. Maybe not points production wise, but man, he's going to be annoying.
So really quickly before all right. So which one do we want to do next? Do we want to do the Devils next because that's the longest list that's left, or do we want to try to wipe out the three teams?
Let's wipe out the quick ones here. The Islanders have only acquired Alexander Romanov, who they got at the draft. Now
I do want to say something about them because that's an interesting one to me. Not necessarily for the player, but what's interesting to me is that they have every reason to run it back because it was a weird year, and they're not going to start by playing their first whatever on the 15 games on the road or whatever.
And they've already kind of made their bet that the coaching change was going to be enough.
Well, I would love to see without all that travel and without certain guys being all over, I'd love to know what that means for Barzal and Lee and Beauvillier and Nelson and all these guys who we know are good players that just didn't seem to put it together completely last season.
Sure.
I think that I don't want to put them in the playoffs because it's going to be a tough playoff year for pretty much everybody else in this division.
Well, and you got to see what their goaltending looks like.
Yeah, but they've got Sorokin, who's pretty darn good, and I do like him. So
yeah, they're not playing behind a Barry Trotz system anymore. I mean, I know it'll be similar. I know it's a lot of this.
But they've got defensemen.
That's
when
fair.
You get they've got guys. Don't get me wrong.
They've got guys. Kevin Durso, 2022.
Well, no. Pellick and Polak and
I know.
And you throw in, Dobson keeps coming up and coming up in the rank. He's rising faster.
Yeah, Noah Dobson's going to be a good little player for sure.
For sure. So I already like their forward group. I think they've got three really solid guys on the back end, and then whatever else they can try to do. Actually, three, and I wonder how Romanov fits in there.
I think there's a chance he gets into their top six, and if he does, I think he'll have...
For sure, I think he's in their top six. I almost wonder if he does well enough, if they would ever move him top four, because I know that he was a highly touted prospect in Montreal.
That's fair.
So I wonder what they decide to do, how they decide to use him.
Yeah, we'll see how that works for them. We talked about the Johnny Gaudreau acquisition for the Columbus Blue Jackets. The other pickup there is interesting. Eric Goodbranson.
It's defensive depth, and I'm not trying to say defensive depth in the sense that not a guy who you hope you never have to use because he's a 7. No, this is a guy who's third pairing material.
Sure,
easily,
and
maybe even number 4, and you throw him on your second pairing when you need somebody in a pinch.
Yeah, and I heard via Elliot Friedman 32 Thoughts podcast, somebody we mentioned quite a lot in this show. Is the fact that those acquisitions, Johnny Gaudreau, Eric Goodbranson, are also messages to Patrick Laine, essentially. Sure. And they're a notification that the team wants to win, and we all know Patrick Laine wants to win. And
think about some of the other guys they have that've kind of withstood all of the changes that were made, and that you still have goaltending because you do have Merzlikins.
Yeah.
So you have goaltending. Well, they have both, don't they? Didn't they re-sign Korpisalo too?
Yes.
So they have both. Werenski's still the horse on the blue line.
He's a monster.
He's the big one there. And they've got some other guys who can certainly help there in addition to Goodbranson. And then at forward, Jake Voracek makes a whole hell of a lot more sense when you've got a Gaudreau and a Laine nearby. You want the guy who knows how to set up guys at that point. Feed those guys as many passes as you want. Think about that though for a second. Gaudreau, Laine, and Voracek for sure on a top power play.
Oh yeah. Jake Voracek will be running the show there. He's got multiple options.
And Werenski on the blue line.
That's going to be a tough unit to play against. I don't care who you are.
See where we're going now? That's going to exactly.
Okay, so I don't think Columbus is necessarily a playoff team just because the division is so tough. New York and Carolina are probably locked in. Pittsburgh re-signing having the whole big three coming back probably puts them in too.
It's interesting because I wrote out what they did acquisition-wise, and it's up until this afternoon, it was just Jan Ruda, which is a good acquisition. Don't get me wrong. He played on Tampa for the last couple of years. So, obviously. But now you add in Jeff Petrie. By the way, I think that the underrated part of that list is the last name, Ryan Poehling.
Yeah, Ryan Poehling is 100% scoring 30 goals this year.
Right, he's
that guy.
No, but exactly. He's the guy who all of a sudden you're going to watch his numbers take off because he's got it in him.
And you're going to put him next to Sid or whatever.
I don't know if you're going to put him next to Sid because of the fact that you're going to – no, because you're going to stick with the Gensel, Crosby, Rust line probably, and then Malkin will be on the second with –
But he might play with Malkin.
He might play with Malkin. He could also – honestly, would it be the worst thing in the world if he was playing with Jeff Carter?
No.
He could still score.
I know, but I think in the top six, he will be a problem.
Well, in general, yeah.
He will be a damaging player to play against.
And then we got to get to the last team because this is not the last team we got to get to is very much in the same boat as Columbus. I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs, but they're better right now than they were at the end of last season.
Yeah, and of the names you have listed here, Carolina's acquired 5 guys, and 4 of them were in trade, and 1 was in free agency.
This is pretty darn. By the way, this is pretty darn close on New Jersey's side because 3 of these are trade.
Well, right, but 4 of those players were acquired in 2 trades, so it was 2 trades and a signing. The most active team so far in this division has been the New Jersey Devils in terms of number of events.
Sure, we work from I don't want to say the bottom up, but close to because
Vitek Vanacek is going to be a phenomenal pickup for them.
I think here's what I think happens. I don't know that Vanacek, much like Mackenzie Blackwood, I don't know that they are elite level goalies by any stretch.
I think the tandem's good enough to get you to the playoffs.
They're good, and I think by having them in tandem and kind of evening out the playing time.
They'll both be better.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to make both of them better, and hopefully you can keep, at least in Blackwood's case for sure, and Vanacek a little bit. Hopefully you keep them both healthy.
Right, and I in a vacuum, knowing what we know about their careers thus far, I think you're hoping Mackenzie Blackwood is your 1A heading into the playoffs, or regardless, you just want one of these guys to establish themselves as the guy if you're making a run to the playoffs.
You do. You know what though? I don't know who's starting on opening night. If I had to guess today, I'd say Blackwood. But
I was going to say you probably default to the guy who's been there.
Right, but I'm saying I don't know.
But listen,
which one is going to get them? I don't know which one's going to get. How about this? I don't know which one's going to make more starts this year.
Okay, that's fair. Home opener in New Jersey, they're rolling out a brand new lineup. The rest of this list, I'm just to blow through it real quick. Andre Palat, Brendan Smith, Eric Howla, and John Marino. All 4 of those guys are going to be on your opening night roster.
Now here's the thing with some of them. I want to kind of wipe out the 2 lower ones for me. Smith is more than serviceable.
Yeah,
he's bottom pairing level guy though. We know this. Howla is an interesting one because of the fact that trade happened because there was pretty much no future in New Jersey for Pavel Zacha. It was a straight up 1-for-1.
That's a hockey trade.
Exactly. Both teams got exactly what they seemed like they were trying to give up anyway. The Marino one is a big deal to me. I think that's a really strong deal.
Yeah.
Especially for what they gave up to Pittsburgh, by the way. Ty Smith and another pick, I believe, was all they gave up.
I do like Ty Smith, but I agree.
No, I do, but I do.
John Marino is an established player.
Right. Ty Smith for John Marino with whatever pick you send over is what we said about getting Ryan Ellis for when the Flyers did it. It's like you go and, all right, did you love giving up Phil Myers? No, you don't, but you got to give to get.
Right. That is how you leverage young assets for established players who are going to help your roster right now.
Sure. And then
the John Marino trade is a great example of that.
Exactly. And then the headliner, right? The headliner of the whole thing is if they didn't get Johnny Gaudreau like we all know they kind of wanted to try to do.
They sure did. They went hard.
Then they got the next best thing, which was Andre Palat.
It's fair. You can't argue.
And here's the thing. I know that Nazem Kadri has not signed yet as of recording this on Saturday.
He's signing 20 minutes after this show gets recorded.
Even if he does, it's no big deal.
No.
Because
we'll be back in 2 weeks to talk
and here's the thing. It's no big deal because I don't think anybody else in this division has anything left to go after that. Stranger things, though, right?
I'm looking at that blue and orange team in that bottom row there, and
I don't know if they have the cap space with all the other guys, though. Like, Anders Lee makes a lot of money.
Lou will make it work.
Yeah, we'll see.
He'll make some contracts disappear in the Long Island.
The point I'm making about Palat is that he was the next best winger. Like, beyond Gaudreau, it was Palat. That was the next best winger. So there you go. They went out and they did their part, too. Now, do we want to shift to the next part?
Yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, put all that next to what the Flyers listed.
Which is
Nick Laurier and Justin Braun.
3 guys who should all be rated about 79 overall on NHL 22.
But you see how every team out there, I mean, with the exception of the Islanders, maybe, every team got somebody who's a little bit like on the same, either on the exact same, like D'Angelo has been an all-star before. I don't want to just.
Every team picked up at least a good player.
Sure.
Not an okay player, not a serviceable player, a good player.
I would even venture so far as to say every team picked up a player that. Okay, and Carolina didn't in this respect, but they're still good players that they picked up. But everybody else just about picked up a player that had something to do with the playoffs and some like a deep playoff run. Like Trocheck was playing for Carolina. Kemper won a Stanley Cup. Gaudreau was, scored a series-clinching goal. Ruda was on Tampa Bay. Palat was on Tampa Bay. Like, everybody picked up somebody who went deep in the playoffs or seemingly went deep in the playoffs.
Just real quick, I'm going to rattle off a couple of these names, and you tell me if they would make the current Flyers top 6 or top 4 better than it currently is. That's all. Right. Just better than it currently is.
Okay.
Andre Palat.
Absolutely.
Okay. John Marino.
Yes.
Dylan Strome. Probably.
Probably depends. Well, and it depends on who's. Well, you know what? Dylan Strome would be your third at that point.
Fair.
But yeah, I get it.
Vincent Trocheck.
Yes.
Brent Burns. Probably.
Probably.
Brent Burns is better than Rasmus Ristolainen. He's a better version of it.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
You can't. You can't. Johnny Gaudreau. Obviously, we know the answer to that one.
Yes.
Jeff Petrie.
Yes.
Okay. And that's a name we barely talked about out of Pittsburgh.
I know. Well, guess what? Can I inform you of something then? While you're over on that side of the graphic, anyway. Yeah. You could have said Jan Ruud, and I would have told you yes.
I know. The Flyers are going to finish last in the division.
Well, as judging by the graphic here, this is all 8 teams in the Metro.
Unless somebody melts down and loses both of their goalies and they're playing with their ECHL goalie by the end of the season, because that is always a possibility in the NHL.
Right. If somebody loses their best, New Jersey should be in a position to contend for a playoff spot. Doesn't mean they're going to make it, but they should be in the running.
Sure.
You know how they don't make the playoffs with all of this happening, right? They don't make the playoffs if you're hearing about Nico Hischier can't play because of blank, and Jack Hughes is dealing with something a little bit now too, or Dougie Hamilton's out with something. Like if they start
even if Mackenzie Blackwood goes out, you got to play Vitek Vanacek for 3 weeks, or
a goalie. It's the same thing. Like if you start to hear something about this guy's hurt, that guy's hurt, then yes, you're going to have problems.
Well, sure, but that's the case with any team in the league. Like, no team can. Like,
but if we're playing the on paper game here, every one of these teams is better than the Flyers on paper.
Well, right. Well, I mean,
to the point where I even went so far as to say, not only are they all past the Flyers, they probably have lapped the Flyers.
Oh yeah, and we can also play the what if game, because if Sean Couturier and Ryan Ellis come back and are healthy, like apparently, allegedly they might be, whatever. Then the Flyers are all of a sudden a much better team, and we talk about these guys sliding down in the lineup, and all of a sudden the roster makes a lot more sense.
Sure.
But that comes back to, do we trust the Flyers to ice a competent roster? In one form or another, whether it's through injury management or whether it's through actually putting the best players on the ice. Do you trust the Philadelphia Flyers to ice a playoff roster anytime soon?
Anytime soon? I mean, depends on what they decide to do going forward. Like, okay, I'll tell you what.
The correct answer is finish with about 14 points this year, fire Chuck, and draft Connor Bedard. And I know.
No, but that's why I hesitated with anytime soon, because things do change if you do get Connor Bedard.
Sure.
Like, there's no doubt about it. Like, it changes it changes things. But and listen, I don't want to make it seem like you can still get a really good player even if you don't pick first next year in a draft. Like, if you pick third, it's going to probably be a player who could have gone first overall in any other year.
If you're not top two, though, if it's not Bedard or to a lesser extent Michkov.
Yeah,
and obviously there's still another year of Michkov to look at, but we all kind of know Connor Bedard's the guy. But
because Bedard, unlike anybody else, even this year when it was Shane Wright or whomever, like Shane Wright fell to fourth. Why? Because
he didn't play for 2 years.
Well, yes, but that's I know. But like what I'm saying is that because it wasn't that clear cut. Like
right. Right.
This is so clear cut. This is as clear cut as it's been since McDavid, and I think we've already said that. But that's it's worth repeating.
By the way, you can make a real argument that the Seattle Kraken got better by drafting Shane Wright than the Flyers did by any other move they made.
Oh, Seattle with Shane Wright already locked up, and that's potentially on the roster next year.
And that's nothing against Cutter Gauthier.
No, who I do think could have all the tools to be a really good NHL player.
He's certainly better. They picked him fifth. And you can't afford to miss on a pick like this when you're as bad as you are.
But Shane Wright with Matty Beniers, with you name it, with the rest of these guys, like
I can't wait for Dave Haxtell to healthy scratch both of them for a game in November. I can't wait. It's going to be great.
I can't wait for them to have all those players be a little bit more of an exciting watch, and then remember that they have Martin Jones in goal.
Oh God. You know what?
Well, that's not the only guy they have. We should be clear. Martin Jones is like he's going to back up again because they do still have Grubauer.
Right, and Philip Grubauer is a solid goalie. So.
And Grubauer probably, of course, he is, because Grubauer probably won them a few games last year. No
Absolutely.
Doubt. All right, can we get into to kind of start to put the finishing touches on this? Can
Please.
we get to a couple of other teams that I think had really good days?
Pulling back the curtain a little bit, we are recording this on Saturday night, a little bit of a weird time slot for us, but we're very tired.
Now, here's the thing, okay? I know Buffalo doesn't have anything significant on this list. What I'm trying to do is just give a comparison. Like, that's a team that held their course. I don't want to say kind of like the Flyers did, but like it wasn't impactful. But look at what they've done. Like I don't want to say that for sure and certain that Buffalo is going to be able to put certain guys on their roster immediately, but they drafted really well in this draft.
Buffalo has a really good little prospect pool right now.
And that's the more interesting part for me, is that Buffalo has committed to the we're drafting a lot of players kind of thing.
Buffalo did the tear it all the way down. I'm talking almost 10 years ago at this point to try to draft Connor McDavid.
And think about it for a second, okay? One of the things I feel like we've talked about, and I don't want to obviously listen. Sean Couturier on the Flyers can be a star level player if he puts it, if he's healthy and everything's going the way it should, right? But I don't know that the Flyers have a star this year because of the fact that you have.
I don't think the Flyers have a superstar.
Well, because I don't even know if they have just a star in terms of
I think Joel Farabee can be that player,
Yeah,
but I certainly understand.
Well, but see this, and this is where I'm going, because he's not starting the year, and if Couturier is not what he's expected to be because of his injury issues and all that stuff, I don't like. Do you realize that without Joel Farabee, your top line left winger is probably James Van Riemsdyk?
So anyway, let's talk about these Atlantic Division teams because I'm depressed.
So can I want to go back to Buffalo for a
second.
Yeah,
please.
A couple guys, because Tage Thompson really emerged last year, and I think that's a big deal. They re-signed Victor Olofsson, by the way.
Yeah,
another good player.
Big little signing for them.
I am very interested to see Peyton Krebs next year.
Yeah,
like, boy, do I like the way he plays.
And we're talking training wheels off Peyton Krebs.
Right. I want to see the next step of Peyton Krebs. Exactly.
I want to see him start flipping up Michigan goals.
Yeah. So let's not bury the lead here, because there's a name on the left side here that's pretty, and by the way, what was this, I guess? So Thursday, the day of the first round of the NHL draft, was the day that the very top name on the list on the left side was acquired by the Ottawa Senators, Alex DeBrincat.
I would just like to point out that the Ottawa Senators fired Pierre Maguire and immediately started making fantastic moves.
You're not wrong.
Acquire Alex DeBrincat.
Okay, so first of all, by the way,
massive trade.
They get DeBrincat, and I even put out there, because someone said, is it enough to entice another person to come to Ottawa? And I even said, I don't think we're done hearing from the Ottawa Senators this offseason.
To be fair, I also don't think he needed that much enticing.
Oh, I believe he didn't need that much enticing, but
just as evidenced by the number.
But do you think now, like when you go back and look, because they were also very active in re-signing their own core. Like Josh Norris got a new deal. That's huge for them to know what he's getting paid for the next. I think it was an 8-year deal, right? For the next 8 years.
I believe so. Yeah.
So like to know what you're paying him for the next 8 years, knowing he's a key part of your core. I already mentioned about before Brady Tkachuk and Tim Stützle and all the others. I mean, Thomas Chabot's been around for a much longer period of time, but all those guys are involved in this, right? And then you go out and, by the way, you acquire a goaltender who you think is going to help in regards with Cam Talbot.
Cam Talbot was very, very solid for the Minnesota Wild.
Yes,
I know we have a little bit of a sour view on him here in Philly because he was here for 6 months, played twice, and sucked. But he has been excellent for the Minnesota Wild, and I'm willing to give him a little bit of a pass.
Yes, he's had good years. And then came the most obvious one of all when it was but here's where I'm going with this. Before DeBrincat and before you kind of saw like the young core was the young core, and it's still very young, don't get me wrong. When you bring in DeBrincat, that's a big statement for where you think you're going. And at that point in time, this is why I felt the way that I did. I'm like, something's going to happen here because of the fact that now they just need the veteran guidance.
Right. And then they got it.
Big time. Here comes Claude Giroux.
So remember how earlier in the show we talked about the Philadelphia Flyers doing step A, B, C, D, E, F to get Johnny Gaudreau and then failing on step Z by not trading the JVR contract and making the necessary room?
Okay.
This is how you treat a player who wants to come home and play for you.
Yeah, they worked around all the other stuff and made sure that they had the room to do whatever else they wanted to do, right?
Now, I don't know if 3-4 years ago when the Ottawa Senators traded Erik Karlsson, I don't know if they had Claude Giroux in mind that far back.
Right.
For example, by the way, I do think that the Kevin Hayes trade was laying the first bricks in the road for Johnny Gaudreau. Anyway, I don't know if trading Erik Karlsson away was a move with Claude Giroux in mind, but it certainly seems like since they figured out that they were going to blow it all up and try to kind of put something back together here, it seems like they've planned for this offseason.
Yeah, they definitely did.
Because we have seen big, impactful, high-level moves out of them. They're going to be a really good team. They're not going to be okay. They're going to challenge for a division spot in the Atlantic.
This team feels like a playoff team now.
I agree. I don't know if the Metro gets a wild card spot this year. And that's why it's so uncertain. And we talked about it a little bit with the last slide on the screen.
Yeah.
It's impossible because the entire East has just gotten so incredibly better.
Yeah.
The ones we have on our screen right now are the Ottawa Senators, the Detroit Red Wings, and the Buffalo Sabres, the 3 bottom teams in the division last year. And we're sitting here talking about the Ottawa Senators like they're a shoo-in for the playoffs. Now, maybe they are, maybe they're not. Obviously, there's a whole lot of season left to be played.
And here's the thing. This is why I did what I did, and that's why I threw Buffalo in. Because what I really wanted to do more than anything was go, listen, I don't need to sit here. The only other team that was lower than this was Montreal. And Montreal is going to come in with the first overall pick, who we assume is going to play from day one.
Probably.
So we assume Uri Slafkovsky is going to play. And then they did other stuff, though, too. Like Kirby Doc.
Yep.
Like they're out there doing what they need to do and trying to figure out a way to get themselves a little bit better. I'm not saying, like, did they make some trades? Yes, they did. But they also, like, positioned themselves to bring some people in to try some new things.
Every single team in the bottom half of the Atlantic got better. Now, the Buffalo Sabres probably didn't get better enough to, make a real ripple, anything like that.
No, and can I say something else about some of the other teams in the Atlantic at least? Like,
Okay.
Tampa Bay, for the most part, Palat's a big loss, but Tampa Bay went signing crazy with let's keep our guys. So Cirelli, Sergachev, I believe what was the other one? Chernak got a big deal too,
yes.
I believe, right? And
yes.
and
all 3 of them, I think, got 8 years.
Right. And as much as it hurts that you're going to lose an Andre Palat, you've got other players.
Yep.
You've got a lot of other players.
Yep.
So you have that ability to do that. Like, do you know who I think really suffered an awful lot on free agency day that was certainly had a lot more going for them at the time at the end of the season? Florida.
Yes.
Like,
Florida had a rough
let's put it this way. 2 names are on the screen right now.
Yep.
Were acquired by Florida, no less.
Yep, both of them were trade deadlines, and they were both veteran rentals, so I don't necessarily think they're 100% shocked to see these names on the free agency list. But
no, not at all.
There was talk that they were making moves to keep Claude, and I don't know if there was any moves on Ben Sherratt, but I'm sure they had a conversation with him at least.
Sure. So, but now, I do think that for sure Ottawa has entered that discussion.
Right, and I think Ottawa made probably the best quantity or the best quality of moves. They added Alex DeBrincat, a bona fide 40-goal scorer.
What happens if you have quality and quantity like the Detroit Red Wings?
Well, we're getting to that, right? But the Ottawa Senators add a 40-goal scorer in Alex DeBrincat, a guy who has crossed the 100-point barrier and been nominated for the Hart and Claude Giroux. Cam Talbot, who he was nominated for the Vezina a couple years ago, correct?
He might have been.
In Edmonton?
He played an awful lot in Edmonton. I don't know if he ever
that one season that he was like 937 or something ridiculous. He was unreal that one year.
Yeah, he was.
But the Detroit Red Wings probably did the most to improve their team overall, if that makes sense. Like, I think the Ottawa Senators were picking and choosing and filling in spots and making the kind of moves that are going to elevate them to the next level.
Right. You know what this was for the Detroit Red Wings? This was
we don't want to suck anymore.
Well, no, this was Steve Yzerman looking at last year and going, all right, Morris Seider is the Calder Trophy winner. Lucas Raymond was right up there with him. Okay, and then there's more. Like,
it's time to start surrounding these boys with some talent.
It's not like Dylan Larkin's gotten worse. He's still a very good player.
Right.
And you've got a young group in here, and it's like, all right, let's support this thing, right?
Yep.
And where does it all start? You start by getting a goaltender way before free agency hits. You trade for Ville Husso, and you get a goaltender who's going to probably, again, I think this is another one of your New Jersey-like tandems here. Where
I feel like tandems are a theme of the show today.
Husso and Nedeljkovic are going to be
that's a hell of
really
a tandem,
good
man.
Tandem. And then
I think Nedeljkovic has the talent to be a 55, 60-game starter, but I think if you can platoon him with a guy like Husso, I think you're incredibly happy.
And here's something that I think seriously about what the Red Wings did here from a forward perspective. Defensively and at forward, they didn't go out adding a star, but they added a lot of good players.
Dominic Kubalik is a super solid player. Oli Mata is a solid player. David Perron is an
all-star, by the way.
Right.
So you've got something there. Kopp had a great last half of the season,
I was saving Andrew Kopp because I think Andrew Kopp is the star of that bunch out of the Detroit
Really,
signings.
I see. I gravitated a little bit more towards Perron because I think the Perron can score.
Yeah, but the problem is, I agree with you. I absolutely agree that David Perron is absolutely going to make the Detroit Red Wings better this year. Mm-hmm. Andrew Kopp's going to make them better for the whole contract.
Okay, that's fair.
Andrew Kopp is, as far as I'm concerned, he's part of that core. Like, he's right in there with your Dylan Larkins. Like, I think he hitches right in and is part of that group immediately because you signed him to a core player kind of contract.
And then, what more can you say about Ben Sherratt being part of this group too? Like, Sherratt's a great. Like, I feel like Sherratt probably falls in line right next to Seider. Doesn't he?
Might, if he can keep up with Seider. He plays with Seider.
Do you even worry about if he can keep up, or do you just say hang back in case something happens? Play defense, bud.
I worry about Seider just being so much better than him everywhere that I worry about it. I worry about him maybe trying to do too much.
Possibly. I mean,
but either way, very talented defenseman Ben Sherratt is. He'll slot in somewhere in their top four, and he's going to be a massive contributor.
Well, I'm trying to look at some of the others that are on the roster too, just to try to see if there's anybody else who would jump in there.
Yeah.
Because I think like Sherratt seems like the most natural guy to go in there. Because he would play the left side to Seider's right.
Okay.
In that sense, I think that you're looking at probably a Mata Hronik second pairing there.
Okay.
Potentially, and then I mean, you still have a bunch of bottom guys. Like I put Mark Pysyk on there, and I don't even know if he's in the top 6.
That's fair. You also have to look at Ali Uollevi. He's going to be up there too.
Yeah, eventually, whenever it happens, right?
Maybe this year.
Yeah, I get. They're another one.
His time's coming.
Stockpiled, right?
Yep.
Stockpiled the draft picks and all that type of stuff because
they tore it all the way down too.
Well, because it's not like it's an offense that's nothing more than Seider's really good on the back end. They've got Lucas Raymond, and that's the end of story, right? Like, they like I mentioned Larkin already. They've got Tyler Bertuzzi, who puts up a lot of points when he's able to play.
Yeah,
and I mean,
and where he's able to play.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I thought when they got Jacob Vrana, that was a little underrated when they got him. Like,
I agree.
Guy who can score. I think Kubalik falls right in line with that. You got Kopp now. You got Perron now. Like,
this is the kind of...
And I didn't even mention Philip Zadina.
This is the kind of team that if everyone hits their groove and everyone kind of, has a career year all at the same time, Detroit can be a problem. And I'm not talking about... they squeak into the playoffs. I'm talking about a real problem in that division. Like, if everyone gels the right way, if everyone kind of breaks out all at the same time, and by the way, it turns out Steve Yzerman's good at building rosters that can do that, they're going to be a real problem fast, quick, and in a hurry.
Well, and you know what the thing is that it's like Steve Yzerman's doing it again, right? Like,
the Yzer plan is strong.
I hear you. Exactly. But do you see what happens? I love that you just said that. See what happens when you go in with a plan?
Yep.
A real plan, not I hope everything works out.
He's the Yzer man with the Yzer plan.
It still blows my mind that these 90s legends are this good.
Sakic and Yzerman being as good as they are is not fair.
What about Chris Drury too? Like, Drury's part of that group.
We're hoping that talent continued into the 2010s and Danny Briere got some of it.
Maybe. I mean, it's pretty insane, is it not?
Yeah. It's actually ridiculous. Were there any other moves from around the league that you wanted to talk about, or?
I don't know.
Honestly, I feel like not a whole lot happened in the West. Like, we talked about the Atlantic, we talked about the Metro. I feel like that's where most of the talent, it feels like, moved east. We talked about Oscar Lindblom signing in San Jose.
Yeah, we did. I'm actually trying to go and see if I can't look up a couple others just to see if there's any good ones.
The Ducks didn't qualify anybody. Sonny Milano hit the market for some reason.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. I
don't get it.
I'm trying to scroll through a couple of things here because it's as it typically does. It slows down after the first day or so.
Sure. And there are still some notable names on the market. We talked about Nazem Kadri a little bit earlier. He is still out there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and he's taking his time now.
Right. There's some.
You know who else is still? I believe is still out there. Isn't John Klingberg still out there too?
I believe so. I'll take a look here, but
I don't. I thought there was some stuff that was happening, but I don't know that he actually signed anywhere.
Right.
Okay, this one wasn't bad. Anaheim got Ryan Strome. That's a good one.
Okay, fair enough.
I didn't think that was a bad pickup for them.
By the way, I really wish a team had picked up all three Strome brothers. They were all available this summer.
I know.
Matthew's not worth a whole lot because Dylan and Ryan are kind of the top of the class there, but come on, you could have done all three Strome brothers. That's pretty cool.
I know, right? I know. Let me see if there's any other good ones on here.
Patrick Laine still hasn't signed his deal, but we've heard good things about that. That looks like it's coming.
It's a given. He's going to stay in Columbus and sign like they want him to.
Matthew Tkachuk, it's a similar situation in Calgary. He's probably going to sign there.
I got to imagine so.
Negotiations with the Tkachuks are always tough, going back to Keith.
Nick Cousins in Florida. There you go.
Oh yeah, sure.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm still.
Pierre-Luc Dubois is a free agent, an RFA. He is apparently unhappy in Winnipeg.
Yeah, but I think some of these will work themselves out. This is a good one. Seattle, Andre Burakovsky.
Okay,
that was a good deal.
Yeah, that was a good little pickup. Absolutely.
Yeah, so that was a good one.
Victor, honestly, Toronto picked up a couple decent little names here. They got Jordy Ben, who's whatever. Victor Mete, solid.
Tampa kind of replaced the Jan Ruda with Ian Cole. That's okay. To an extent. I mean, that contract was signed way before Ruda went to Pittsburgh, I believe. Right. But trying to see if there was any other good ones. I did see. I do want to get into a couple of moves that were made by Chicago. Being a team that can't really do a whole lot. Oh, by the way,
talking about teams that are slashing and burning and cutting it all down.
By the way, Vetrano also went to Anaheim, so that's kind of an interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Like now you got Vetrano and Strome.
Frank Vetrano's a decent little player too.
Who both played for the Rangers last year, and you're going to throw him with who knows? Like you're going to throw him in a group where Zegras is and all that stuff. Like they got some forwards. You can't deny that.
Could be fun.
This was an interesting one too. Tampa Bay getting Vlad Namestnikov back. That was an interesting one. What about this one? Vancouver signing Ilya Mikheyev for 4 years.
Yeah, that was a big deal.
That was a big
deal. Best name in hockey, Greg McKegg signed a 2-year contract with the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, I do see that one. Okay, so these Chicago for what they're doing, and you're right, they're totally dismantling the whole thing. But this is the type of stuff that the Flyers should have been doing when they didn't get Gaudreau.
Yep.
Andreas Athanasiou and Max Domi each get 1 year, $3 million.
Beautiful deals.
Now, what can you do with those deals?
You can extend them if they're good. You can trade them if they're really good.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you can trade them even if they're just good because of the fact that you can also sit there and go, hey, playoff team, you want Max Domi, you want Athanasiou? Great. We'll eat half the salary. Give us a high draft pick. Give us a first or a second.
Yep.
Or something like that, right?
If we route it through another team, you can get that number under $1 million.
Right. Trying to see if there's any other. Oh, do we want to bring up Nick Ove-Kubel going to Toronto?
Well, he doesn't have to worry about dropping the cup there.
That's true. By the way, St. Louis. I want to bring up St. Louis for a second because St. Louis didn't really bring anybody new in, but they sure took care of their own.
Except for David Perron.
Well, except for Perron, but Nick.
Because you heard about that, right? He was pretty jaded.
Yeah, I did hear stuff about that, but
he signed back with them 3 times.
Yeah,
it's like the JVR thing, but like more.
It is a little bit.
They didn't offer him a contract, and he was not very happy.
Yeah, I believe that. Nick Leddy did re-sign though, and I think the deal for Robert Thomas was a pretty good one.
That deal was smooth.
Yeah,
I like that one.
By the way, and Thomas Greiss there too is not bad to put behind Binnington if you get the most. Oh, Toronto getting Ilya Samsonov is a pretty significant deal. That was a good one.
Yes, and also the goalie they acquired via trade, Matt Murray from these Ottawa Senators.
Sure, absolutely. Well,
we haven't talked about that on this show. 2-time Stanley Cup champion Matt Murray.
Well, and here's the thing: why did they have to acquire a goaltender at all? Because Jack Campbell signed in Edmonton.
Right.
That's going to be an interesting one, too.
That domino effect is crazy. Jack Campbell signed in Edmonton, so they had to get Matt Murray, so the Senators had to get Cam Talbot. It's a whole thing.
By the way, okay, maybe Jack Campbell actually, I guess technically was first maybe on this list, but Claude Giroux signed with Ottawa at like 12:01.
Yep.
Like it was pretty much already a done deal.
Definitely no tampering there.
I know, right? Well, Jack Campbell was about the same time, according to this, because they have Jack Campbell on the TSN tracker first.
Right.
Then Giroux. So interesting stuff. But do you notice what we just did? Like, okay, so Colorado didn't really... By the way, Colorado had a perfectly fine first day of free agency because they brought back Arturi Lehkonen and Josh Manson. Like, okay, you took two of your really, really, really good trade deadline acquisitions and found a way to keep them, especially Manson, because everybody thought that Manson was going back to Anaheim.
Yeah,
and
everybody, myself included.
And you got him to stay. That's great.
Man, Joe Sakic is too good at his job.
I hear you. But like, even those teams, like, you don't need to see Colorado and Tampa and some of these other ones that were, in there. Like they're doing what they had to do, right? Like they're doing what they think is the last step. Like Edmonton. Did Edmonton do anything other than make sure they got a goalie?
No.
Because
that's all they needed to do.
Because that's what they needed to do, right?
Yep.
Like, isn't it nice to do what you're supposed to do? Like, hey, we know that this is a weakness. Let's go out and get that.
Right. And Colorado said, hey, we know this works. Let's keep everybody. Mm-hmm. And Tampa Bay said, we know this works. Let's keep everybody.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I mean,
so this
Colorado because Colorado lost Burakovsky and they lost
and they're losing Kadri.
They're probably going to lose Kadri, right. And then I feel like there was one more that I'm missing.
Yeah, but they get healthy Sam Girard back next year, so it's like not even fair.
Oh no, there isn't one that I'm missing. They kept Nichushkin too because they got that done before everything. That's what I'm thinking of. So you're doing your part. You kind of had to pick and choose. I think that I agree with what they did, by the way, because if you were going to choose Nichushkin, you knew Burakovsky was gone.
Right.
Like it just felt like that was the natural thing. And Kadri was going to be tough because he was going to demand a raise. Like
and he absolutely deserves that after the season
probably priced you out in Colorado, which there's a difference between being priced out in Colorado when you already spend a lot of money on a lot of other good players, right?
Hey, so speaking of spending money on good players, Nathan MacKinnon is entering the last year of a contract that pays him $6.3 million.
There's a 0% chance he's not in Colorado.
I understand. Saturday, July 16th, 2022.
Yeah. Or sooner, potentially. I think it might be a little sooner, but I get your point.
I'm asking you to make a prediction today.
Sure. You're saying for today. Okay, I got you.
Does Nathan MacKinnon's next contract, is it over $12 million a year?
Ooh, 12? That might be a tough one. It's definitely over 10. It's probably over 10 and a half.
It's probably over 11. I think 11 is where you start if you're the Colorado Avalanche. Because I think Nate's coming in at 13 or 14, because why wouldn't you? I'm not saying he gets it, but he should be coming in with it.
He's going to get paid. And here's the thing. You've just got to determine, by that point, you're what? One more offseason away?
Right.
Do
you sign him now? Do you have to? What happens if they go win the Cup again?
I don't know.
Does he sign for anything other than max? And then you just work out term?
Hold on. Do you want to know what I think could potentially happen here? And I'm being dead serious when I say this. We all want to put that. Like, is he worth the price tag? Absolutely, he is. Right. I wonder if he doesn't take a little bit of a discount, knowing what they have to do to be the team that they are. Like this is the guy who comes in, like you're sitting here thinking, oh, this guy should ask for 12, 13, 14, whatever, because he's that good. This is the guy who comes in at 10 and a half, 11, because he knows that that's what it needs to be for them to still be good.
I think if you're still asking cup-starved Nathan MacKinnon, I think that's the answer you get.
Maybe, but if
what if they go win?
Then I think you want to keep winning, and you might try to figure out a way to keep the band together.
I think you look at it and go, man, I'm 27 years old. I get to sign my big, fat 8-year cash-out contract. Pay me.
Yeah, I don't
You know how players are. They know that there is a finite amount of sunlight.
Sure, but we'll see. I mean, we'll see. It's that's a conversation for another time. I do think he's gonna make a lot of money. I just wonder where his head's, because he does seem like that kind of guy. Right.
I agree.
Well, because you're okay, and I understand it was signed much longer ago, but hear me out here, okay? Why are the Pittsburgh Penguins running it back one more time, mostly with the same core group, right?
Because they're paying Sid 8.7.
That's a good place to start, don't you think? But they're he signed that contract. What? I'm trying to go back and look it up. It's still got 3 years left.
9, 10?
No, it's got to be. I thought it was.
It was one of those stupid billion-year illegal contracts.
Yeah, that's right. They did away with these. So it was a 12-year deal at the time.
Yep.
Okay,
that's what I'm saying. This contract is stupid. Now, but when he signed it, he was making more, relatively speaking, than Connor McDavid makes in comparison to the cap when he signed it.
Well, because he signed it in 2011, 2012, I believe.
Exactly.
So I get you. But okay, so by the way, with Pittsburgh, I want to bring something up that ties to the Flyers really quick, and this is where we can kind of get out of here on, because it's one more little jab before we get out of here, right?
Yeah, we like that.
Okay, so you just mentioned, what Sidney Crosby makes, so you just mentioned it. Okay.
The stupid contract number thing. Yeah, I get it.
Well, yeah, but that one actually makes a little bit of sense.
I
know.
It's
not sense.
Well, sure, but if 6.5 made sense, he would have ended it in 6.587.
Yeah, it's true. By the way, I think it's really funny that you stopped at 6.5 and stopped yourself short of 6.6. Because nobody touches that number either.
He should just sign for... man, I really wish Miroslav Shatan had signed for 6.666. Come on.
That's good. All right, so you just mentioned what Crosby makes, and we've already touched on two others because their contracts are recent.
Malkin and Letang making 6.1 apiece.
Okay. I just want to ask you a question, and I'll see if you know the answer, and I've counted this out, so it's not like I already know the answer.
Okay.
How many players on the Pittsburgh Penguins are making $5 million or more?
Well, we got those three.
Okay.
I try not to think about the Penguins, so I don't actually know this answer.
Oh, well, hold on a minute. And the answer, okay, caveat. Well, never mind. I'll ask. Okay. Just go ahead, and then I'll get into it.
I'd be willing to bet that Jeff Carter's probably making more than 5.
Jeff Carter is making $3.125 million. Yes.
Okay. I'm willing to bet Brian Rust is making 5.
Brian Rust is making 5.125.
Probably Jake Gensel as well.
Jake Gensel is making 6.
I'm willing to bet that's probably the end of the list.
Okay.
Unless there's some cap dump I'm forgetting about here.
All right, so here you go. So you said Crosby, Malkin, Gensel, Rust,
Letang.
and Letang.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have it at 5.
Yeah.
There are. Hold on a minute here. I want to make sure I get my math right here. There are 2 more forwards.
Okay.
And one more defenseman.
Oh wow! So 8 members of that roster are making. Wow.
Well, and I'll give you who they are so we can wrap up.
Yeah.
But, well, for one, Jason Zucker's making 5.5.
I forgot. I always forget he's there.
Okay, and in fairness, one of the forwards is recent. Ricard Raquel is now making $5 million.
I totally forgot Ricard Raquel signed there. Holy crow!
Okay,
that's a great signing. Holy crap!
And again, caveat on the other defenseman because they just got him. Jeff Petrie makes 6.25.
I'm not even counting that one because I hadn't seen that contract.
No, but now it's still the case nonetheless. Okay.
Yeah.
So all right, how many players on the Flyers make more than $5 million?
Sean Couturier, Kevin Hayes, Travis Konechny, Ivan Provorov, James Van Riemsdyk. That's 5 off the top of my head here. Now I got to actually think. Rasmus Ristolainen, 77. Ryan Ellis. Sanheim's under 5, isn't he? 4.6 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think if there's any other forwards. I feel like I'm missing somebody.
Let me do this again. Let's just let me recap for a minute.
Yeah.
You said Provorov. You said Risto. You said Deanna.
Ellis.
And you said Ellis. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then you said Couturier. I know you got Couturier. You
I got
said
Hayes.
Hayes, Van
I got
Riemsdyk,
JVR.
and Konechny, you said,
Konechny.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any others that come to mind?
Somehow, I still think Michael Raffles making $5 million somewhere, but I know he's not. It just feels like it.
Okay, so do you want to know the funny part? First of all, by the way, do you know how many that is so far that you've?
That is 8, I believe, the same number.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. That's not all of them, obviously.
Right.
Because my point of doing this is that there's more.
Right.
The funny part is that you've meant like. I'm going to run down the list again that you gave because I want you to figure out what all of them have in common.
Oh, God.
To an extent, okay?
How many of these deals did Chuck Fletcher sign?
No, that's not what it is, but ready?
Because it's a lot of them.
Hayes, Van Riemsdyk, Konechny.
Oh, I missed Cam Atkinson. Okay, so throw that in there. Sorry.
Okay. You got Cam Atkinson on it, but I'm going with the 8
sorry.
No, but I'm going with the 8 first. Hayes, Van Riemsdyk, Konechny. Provorov, Ristolainen, D'Angelo, Ellis, and you said Couturier. So Couturier, maybe I don't think you feel this way, but what are the other 7?
Failing to live up to expectations? Is that what you're talking about?
No, but guys that you're not like sitting here going, oh yeah, he's like you had there's like you might be able to say they're good, but there's a but.
I think what you're asking is, would you rather pay Sidney Crosby, Jake Gensel, and Chris Letang, or...
No, what I'm saying is that, like, for example, okay, so you just brought up Cam Atkinson. We already said earlier in the show, good player, likable guy. You know, by the way, we never said the thing about the Columbus thing.
Oh, yeah.
That he took a picture with Johnny Gaudreau because both of them wore 13.
Yeah, there was a little passing of the torch moment.
It's pretty funny, yeah.
I like to say it. I know that you called it a little bit of a shot, and I get that. It's a little bit of a jab. But I don't think Cam Atkinson is capable of a jab. So I can only take it as a nice, wholesome gesture.
It's not a secret that they're friends.
Right.
I get it. But here's the thing. If Johnny tweets that, then I think you get it. Like, oh, yeah, Cam Atkinson's in Columbus because he lives there in the offseason. That's fine.
Yeah.
And if he tweets it, it's like, look, I'm so excited to have my jersey, and this is my Bud's number, who I played college
you think Cam tweeting it out is a little bit of a shot?
Like, it's... I'm not going to sit here and say that Cam Atkinson's spending every waking moment on Twitter or something. Like
he doesn't strike me as that type. He seems pretty well-rounded.
I think that he's got better things to do. First of all, he's got that battery hockey thing that he helps run.
Oh, yeah.
In Columbus. And then he's got 2 kids with 1 more on the way. Like, right. I think he's got better things to do in the offseason than worry about what's going on Twitter and what people are saying about the team.
Well, and what's going on with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Like, they're not even his team anymore.
Well, but worry about what Flyers fans are saying online. Like, I'm sure, do you really think he sits there and checks his mentions when people sit there and go, the team you're on sucks, by the way?
Nope,
whatever,
he's
right?
counting his millions.
Yeah, but he's the 3rd highest paid forward, but he's probably because he's behind Couturier and Ellis too. He's probably the 5th highest player on the roster.
Okay.
Like, it's not that bad. By the way, there's one more that you forgot to mention who you really like, by the way.
Oh, is Joe making that money?
That's the new contract.
I forgot that contract was kicking in.
I mean, it is $5 million on the button, but it is $5 million.
Right.
So there you go. But that's what I'm saying. Like, when you sign big tickets with big term, you get stuck.
Yeah.
And you can end up with big tickets and big term, and
you could end up with Rasmus Ristolainen on your team for 5 more years.
You could end up with that, and it's Crosby and Malkin and Letang and Gensel and guys you want to build around because you know they're good and they've won for you.
And you couldn't trade a first-round pick to get rid of one of the bad contracts you already have.
Right, potentially. That's how we're going to leave you this week, I guess.
Yeah, I'm really sorry we're not going to leave you on some happy, pleasant note, but I'll be honest.
It wasn't meant to be a happy, pleasant show.
I'll be honest. This is as down as I've ever been on the Philadelphia Flyers.
So I think I started to say this, and I don't know if I finished the point. A thing that gets, a term that gets thrown out a lot, and I think it's been asked a lot in the last 2 years, is that is this rock bottom for the Flyers, right?
This is. I think this is it.
Do you know why it is, or why it feels like it is more than ever?
Because you can't do it. You're stuck. You have no flexibility. You have no this. You have no that. Your contracts are locked in.
You're not okay.
There's nothing.
You're not wrong.
And Chuck's still the guy in charge.
You're still not wrong, but that's not the reason for me. Do you know what the reason is for me? This is about as united as I've seen the fan base in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Like we've sat here and argued, is 9-0 rock bottom?
Yep.
And in theory, it's not, because that team was going to play another game.
Right.
There's always something more to come. In this particular moment, in this offseason, and I said this on the air on 97.3 the day after in reflection, right? This is not only is it as united as the fan base has been, but this felt like an eye-opening day for people where it's like they literally do not have a clue.
Yep.
You're watching Buffalo,
rudderless,
Chicago, Arizona make better decisions. I think I cited in the article, Chicago is quite literally blowing it up. They're trading away all their NHL talent, pretty much. They're bringing in a couple players to fill it out, but they traded away everybody, just about. And then Buffalo's been in a decade-long rebuild, trying to get out of it anyway, and at least seems like they know what they are. And Arizona is the worst organization from a business standpoint in the league, because they're going to play next year in a college arena that holds 5,000 people.
But at least they have 7,000 draft picks.
But at least their hockey operations department has an idea of what they are and what they should try to do. Right. That's the difference.
With some missteps along the way, but they're working.
They've made missteps, but I think they've made missteps because people aren't stupid. They're one of the least funded teams from a business standpoint. They kind of have no choice.
They've made some faux pas. Mitchell Miller pick. Bad pick.
Well, yeah, that from you're talking about optics. That's
right. Losing the draft picks because you were working out prospects early. Bad thing. But that was all under old management, and they've been doing a really good job of managing their assets since John Chayka's left.
But that's what I'm saying. Everybody
There's
else
a real chance we see some empty buildings this year.
I'm already preparing for it. I mean, who's going to show up to watch this team? Especially, and here's the thing. That's not true, because opening night will still be the same way, and all. Because you know what? More than anything, what people are going to want to see and what people will buy into early is, what is Tortorella doing to the team? How does that impact what's going to happen? And we'll see where it goes from there. I don't think it's going to last very long. I don't think it's going to change much, and I think that once it gets down to it, because I can't picture them winning a lot because of the fact that they don't have a lot, but look at what everybody else did. All these other teams that they're going to play 3 or 4 times a year are better. And it's not even close.
I don't see a road to the Flyers of getting 75 points this year. I just don't see it.
What did they have last year? 60?
It's something like that.
Do they make it there?
I mean, no.
That's where I'm at right now. That's not the benchmark for me.
Like I mentioned earlier, I really do wish we could leave you on a happy note here. We got 2 weeks till our next show.
It will not be all about Flyers. Guess what? It shouldn't be, because there shouldn't be any news.
We're getting into summer shows, and that's going to be full blown. We'll talk about whatever. We'll talk about the Nazem
for an hour. No more 2-hour shows.
No, we'll talk about the Nazem Kadri signing. We'll talk about anything going on. You can find all that stuff in the meantime at Kevin_Durso. Follow him over there. He's doing a great job. Follow us at YWT Podcast. You can find the show anywhere you find podcasts: Facebook, Instagram, Podbean, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify. It's scrolling at the bottom of the screen if you're watching on YouTube. You can find us on sportstalkphilly.com. Make sure to follow them at SportsTalkPHL, at Flyerdelphia. We'll get through this together, kids. It might take some time. We might be rock bottom here, but there's can't get worse, right?
And we're here because we got a job to do. You know, we're here to ride it out with you because we got a job to do. Let's this way. Do you think I care? I'm gonna end up at as many home games as I get my hands on next year for the same reason I did last year and the year before that, right?
Absolutely.
Because that's what my job is. So,
and you know what?
We're right here with you.
Our job is to be back in 2 weeks to talk about it. So until then, we'll see you.